Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into one of Ernest Hemingway's greatest masterpieces to see exactly how it perfectly illustrates his revolutionary approach to writing. We're going to be unpacking his 1952 Pulitzer and Nobel Prize-winning novella, The Old Man and the Sea. Now, on the surface, it's a beautifully simple story, right? It's just about an aging fisherman, a young boy, and a giant fish. But, as you're about to see, the true genius of this narrative actually lies entirely in what the author decided to leave out. And that brings us to this incredibly fascinating thought from Hemingway himself. In his 1932 book, Death in the Afternoon, he made this famous comparison. He said that the dignity of movement of an iceberg is due to only 1/8 of it being above water. Basically, he believed that if a writer knows enough about their subject, they can intentionally omit things. And if they're writing truly enough, you, the reader, are going to feel those omitted things just as powerfully as if they were written right there on the page. So let's look at how he actually built this structure in Section 1, the theory of omission, crafting the iceberg. Okay, so what exactly is the Iceberg Theory? Well, it's a minimalist writing technique. Hemingway would purposefully leave out known facts to give his stories this unspoken weight, a real gravitas. By strictly focusing on declarative sentences and just directly representing the visible world, he kept everything super minimalist. The massive bulk of that iceberg, the rich symbolism, the nuanced history of the characters, all those complex themes, they're operating completely out of sight, deep down in the dark water. For him, the quality of a story could literally be judged by the quality of the material he chose to eliminate. And, this approach didn't just come out of thin air. It was a direct evolution from his early days, stripping away the fluff as a hard-hitting journalist. Back in 1917, he was a cub reporter for the Kansas City Star, and there he learned to focus strictly on immediate facts. Then, moving into the 1920s as a foreign correspondent in Paris covering the Greco-Turkish War, he really learned how to act like a spotlight on events, rather than giving all the background. So by 1923, after he finished his short story Out of Season, he officially locked in this theory of omission. He famously left out the real ending of that story because he realized that skipping it actually made the drama so much stronger. All right, moving right along to Section 2, a deceptively simple tale, Santiago and the Sea. When we actually contrast his earlier and honestly pretty cynical heroes with Santiago, we immediately see this profound shift. He moves toward genuine humility and a deep connection to the natural world. If you look at early Hemingway protagonists, guys like Lieutenant Henry in A Farewell to Arms or Belmonte in The Sun Also Rises, they often faced this meaningless world, what Hemingway famously called the nada. They were isolated, bitter, and kind of defeated by an indifferent universe. But Santiago? Totally different. He isn't bitter at all. He is enduring. He finds real meaning through his shared craft, his sweet bond with the boy Manolin, and his immense, profound respect for the ocean itself. Back when the book was released, a 1952 New York Times review by Robert Gorham Davis really captured this perfectly. He highlighted that Santiago's character represents this beautiful realization. Human worth depends on knowing our limits and understanding our place within nature. Humility here isn't a weakness. It's about knowing exactly what a man can and cannot do all by himself. Santiago is part of a community. He has the boy who loves him. And he even speaks of the sea in feminine terms, treating it like a living, breathing entity that provides for him, rather than some enemy he needs to conquer. Which leads us to Section 3, the real old man, Gregorio Fuentes. Because Santiago wasn't just a symbol. He was heavily anchored in real-world experiences. Hemingway spent decades patrolling the sea with Captain Gregorio Fuentes, and that deep friendship provided the foundational reality for this whole novel. The two of them met sheltering from a storm in 1931 and became completely inseparable, with Fuentes captaining Hemingway's boat The Pillar for 30 years. The actual seed for The Old Man and the Sea was planted when they were near Cayo Paraiso and spotted an old man and a youngster fighting a massive swordfish. They offered to help, but the old fisherman angrily refused them. That raw, intense pride, that became the absolute beating heart of Santiago. And just to prove to you that this kind of monumental struggle isn't just some literary myth, Fuentes himself once battled a black marlin off the coast of Peru that weighed an incredible 1,560 pounds. By the way, that record still stands today. So think about the physical toll, the endurance, the sheer scale of fighting a creature that massive. Hemingway didn't have to invent the grueling reality of Santiago's fight. He literally witnessed it firsthand alongside his best friend. Let's plunge a little deeper down the iceberg in Section 4, the hidden Cuban context, facts beneath the fiction. So there's this subtle little mystery early in the story. Young man Mullen marvels at Santiago's perfectly preserved eyesight. He mentions that a new fisherman in town has terrible eyes because he never went turtling in the brilliant sunlight, which was the occupation that most commonly killed the eyes of local fishermen. Yet Santiago did this brutal work for years, and his eyes are still the exact color of the sea, cheerful and undefeated. So how on earth is that possible for a guy in his 70s? Was Hemingway just taking poetic license to make him seem tough? Well, actually, no. The answer lies in an incredibly ingenious traditional Caribbean trick. They used a remora on a leash to literally save their eyes from the harsh sun reflection. It works like this. You tie a line to a remora, which is a suckerfish that naturally attaches to larger creatures like turtles. You just release it into the water, wait for it to latch onto a passing turtle's shell, and then you just feel the pull on the line and navigate straight to your catch. The fisherman never actually has to scan the blinding, glaring water to find his prey. And this is just brilliant because it illustrates that Santiago isn't some magical saint with symbolic eyesight. He's an expert craftsman who survives through deeply grounded local techniques. This exact method is actually backed up by academic research into historical Caribbean fishing. Hemingway is rewarding the reader who understands this hyper-local context. When Santiago tells Monolin, "I am a strange old man and I know many tricks," it's not just a metaphor for his spirit. It is a literal reference to the immense practical sea knowledge that keeps him alive. We see this layering of reality pop up again with specific references to Joe DiMaggio in September 1950. Throughout the book, Santiago talks about the Great DiMaggio. Well, if you look at the exact dates of the baseball pennant race between the Yankees and the Tigers, DiMaggio is a 35-year-old veteran playing through absolute agony from bone spurs. Sports writers were literally calling for his retirement. This perfectly, seamlessly mirrors Santiago setting out on his 85th day without a fish. It's this hidden subtext reminding us that a true champion doesn't lose their ability just because they hit a dry spell or face the realities of physical decline. Finally, let's head to the very bottom of the iceberg. Section 5, The Eternal Fisherman, Isolation and Endurance. For 3 grueling days and nights, Santiago battles the great fish. He's starving, he's thirsty, and his hands are cut down to the bone. Yet he views this epic, isolating battle not as a conquest, but as a shared, sacred brotherhood. He even calls the marlin his brother, using adjectives like calm and beautiful and noble. He respects his adversary so much that the struggle transcends mere survival. It becomes a profound, deeply personal test of integrity and endurance. And this intense sense of isolation really mirrors Hemingway's own reality. We can draw a straight line from Santiago's solitude on the vast Gulf Stream directly to Hemingway's 1954 Nobel Prize acceptance speech. In that speech, he plainly stated that true writing is a lonely life facing eternity. He wrote, "He does his work alone, and if he is a good enough writer, he must face eternity, or the lack of it, each day. The struggle of the fisherman alone on the water is exactly the struggle of the artist alone at the typewriter. Both have to push themselves way out past where anyone can help them, relying entirely on their own internal codes of discipline." So, does the iceberg theory ultimately teach us that our greatest human victories are actually hidden far below the surface of our visible defeats? At the end of the story, Santiago loses the actual meat of the great marlin to the sharks. He comes back to port with nothing but a skeleton. To the outside world, that probably looks like a massive failure. But we, the readers, got to see beneath the waves. We know the monumental endurance, the deep humility, and the quiet dignity he achieved out there in the ocean. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to consider. In your own life, when you are facing your own deep waters, what unseen strength is holding your iceberg steady?